Okay, I think we can get started with our next session, and I'm excited to welcome Will Miller on specialized and international accreditation in the field and Embry-Riddle's approach. I am serving, among other things, as the Vice President for CAEMHSE for Homeland Security. CAEMHSE is the Council for Accreditation of Emergency Management and Homeland Security Education, so I may be a little biased, so therefore I decided to not talk about CAEMHSE here, but ask and invite Will, whom we actually owe the summit because he is our Zoom event czar, and he was kind enough to make his expertise and time available to set us up on Zoom events for the summit. So thank you, Will, very much. But if you're interested in Homeland Security and Emergency Management academic program education, I put the link to the CAEMHSE website on the chat if you're in charge of a program and are interested in exploring accreditation. We currently have a special available. Feel free to reach out to me. Even also if it's emergency management, I said I'm the VP for Homeland Security, but I can also put you in touch with the experts for emergency management accreditation. But now, without further ado, welcoming Will Miller on accreditation in the field and Embry-Riddle's approach. Will is our university's Associate Vice President for Continuous Improvement and Institutional Performance, where he oversees assessment, accreditation, and state authorization. He has been serving as our university's liaison to the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, also known as SACSOC, and was elected to its Board of Trustees earlier this year. Will also serves as adjunct faculty in our college's Department of Emergency, Disaster, and Global Security Studies. Will, please, over to you.
Thanks, Alexander. Like I said, I'll make sure I keep us on time. As Alexander shared, in my role at Embry-Riddle, I oversee all the areas people tend to not like interacting with: assessment, accreditation, state authorization. It's all about mitigating the in-between between what outside forces want us to do and what we think is best for our students and our programs. But I appreciate having the 10 minutes or so to just share sort of how we approach this. And if you're in higher ed at another institution, we'll kind of share how we institutionally think about these pieces. If you're coming at this from the private sector, the NGO, the nonprofit side. To be honest, this week's a special week when we talk about accreditation because the general public is getting their fair shake at sharing what they think we could be doing and how we might be doing it better and ensuring the robustness and the adequacy of our programs. So this work's especially important right now. Regulatory expectations are up. Public accountability is through the roof. We have lots of discussions with institutional accreditors going on around ROI and the return on what students are investing and what we're spending on higher ed. And it's happening literally today. We have the AIM rulemaking committee. So we have the second week of federal rulemaking around what accreditation will look like 2 or 3 years from now. So they're meeting in DC starting, I think, in 24 minutes. And that group's having all sorts of discussions that will impact accreditation at both an institutional and a specialized levels. So, I mean, if you look at the proposals that are put forward, there's innovation, there's accountability, there's public trust. One of the big things coming from the institutional accreditation rulemaking is a sharper focus on programmatic achievement. So at the federal level, Department of Education has required us to talk about student achievement for the last 10, 15 years. They're now getting to the point where they're talking about, let's disaggregate that down and look at every program to make sure students are meeting success metrics, which could be retention, graduation rates, certification pass rates, but a lot of opportunities, and it gives us time to sort of rethink what this looks like. At Riddle, we historically had a model that was very compliance centered. If my predecessor was coming to talk, Alexander, for example, quickly involved SAC-COC is requiring me to do this, so now I'm requiring you to do this, and I need it in 2 weeks. It was all episodic. It was very much a compliance and reporting focus versus what we're trying to do now is put it into more of an action culture where we're kind of pushing for continual readiness. And as Alexander mentioned with camp, where every 5 years you treat it like a fire drill and drop everything and work on nothing but that for 4 months, and everybody freaks out, and it's a lot of work, and it feels like extra work, and it feels externally driven. Versus if we're doing the right things as a program, the right things as an institution, the right things as a college department at any level you want to look at, and we're doing that regularly, it's a focus on continuous compliance and continuous readiness. Where I feel fairly good that if CAEMHSE called tomorrow and said, "Hey, give us a sense of what this looks like," we'd be able to react to that. I mean, it might take a little bit of time, but it's not going to be the full drop everything approach. And in a lot of ways, these disciplinary specialized accreditors actually do a better job of ensuring student success, especially than the institutional accreditors, because they're able to focus in on more important pieces. So if you look at CAEMHSE, for example, there's discussion within the standards about actions. There's conversations about workforce alignment. There's pieces about being responsive to the needs of public, engaging stakeholders, of looking at outcomes evidence. And it's not just CAEMHSE. At ABET, they obviously have a very strong continuous improvement version. And their vision and versioning of that differs from other accreditors in some cases, but generally fits. They have strong evidence expectations. Abby, who does aviation, has really strong industry alignment. They bring industry folks, much like CAEMHSE, on to visit teams. They look at educational focused, which allows an accrediting team to ask questions that institutional accreditors aren't going to get to. If an institutional accreditor from SAC-COC or Middle States or Northwest or wherever you are comes in and says, "Alexander, I want to talk to you about your college," something has gone wrong if they're getting to that micro level. They're looking at it at a much broader 30,000-foot view. But these accreditors come in and can actually start to say, "What's going on in your courses? What's going on in a more micro level of assessment? How are you making sure students are meeting these outcomes?" So it's about figuring out how we create a structured institutional process. And that starts with intent. We need to know when we're doing things, when they're coming. We need strong self-study opportunities. We need to coordinate meaningful site visits. And then there have to be debriefs. And I'll emphasize for any institution out there or even public side, that debrief's a key component to this. After the visit's over, so many institutions and programs say, "Ooh, we got through that. We're good for 5 years. We'll think about this again in 3 or 4. I'm much more of the mindset of, let's debrief the second they leave or shortly thereafter and figure out what do we need to do now to prevent whatever hiccups we had from re-happening 5 years from now. So that intent phase is incredibly critical, and it also helps us then minimize the amount of resources we're dedicating this to. It also brings in the idea of shared institutional assets. So, we have at Riddle, I'd say approximately 40% of our programs have a specialized accreditation, vastly different accreditors and expectations in some cases. And the experiences with accreditors differ. I mean, even with, Alexander, when he took the worldwide programs through CAEMHSE, was different than when Daytona Beach took the residential the following year, where the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities are. But we need to have our programs learning from one another. If something surfaces during an ABET visit in Prescott, Arizona at our campus, it's still useful information for Alexander to know as he's prepping his programs to look at a different accreditor possibly a few years down the road, because that type of information and infrastructure needs to be reusable. We shouldn't be treating it every time as if it's our first interaction with an accreditor, because at that point we're unfortunately, really just doing it as a compliance exercise versus opportunities to actually identify areas where we can ultimately improve. So if you take it from the idea of being preparation, updating, and then getting to review, we ultimately end up hopefully with reduced faculty burden. To be completely transparent, I don't think we've fully hit that point. I'm sure we have Riddle faculty on here that are thinking external accreditation remains a significant burden that we need to continue to lessen. We have better evidence quality. We have the faster response capabilities. And most importantly for me, we have the improved institutional memory. One of my biggest frustrations when we talk about the CAEMHSE process was our friends in Daytona Beach weren't interested in seeing the worldwide work. Even though worldwide had submitted a self-study, gone through the entire process, we kind of had to push to say, let's look at what worldwide submitted, the type feedback they got and make sure we're not duplicating the same thing and introducing the same conversations. Let's actually show that we've started to improve already. And then it ultimately becomes to a shared ecosystem. And this relationships for the programs that they don't already have. So, there's obviously conversations about students or faculty who their counterparts are in these areas in the student success realm. Learning outcomes, working with my office on how we're doing mapping, academic and operational assessment, faculty qualifications, institutional support, finance, libraries, safety. The first time your faculty are meeting your dedicated librarians shouldn't be during an accreditation visit. And it's essential that we institutionalize this to kind of bring it full circle. So for us, the 4 big takeaways that I'd share out with this, we are pro accreditation. We have a president and a provost who significantly invest and believe in external accreditors because they are sort of the blue ribbon panels that can tell us our programs at a micro level are doing what they should. But we've learned that continuous improvement matters more than perfect reporting. The cycle start and end dates shouldn't matter as much as getting things right. It's not about polish. It's about the work that we actually put in and then making sure it's polished. Specialized accreditation needs to be institutional. If we look at the AIM discussions and what we're seeing that could come out of this week with transparency expectations and accountability structures, the specialized accreditors will be at equal weight with the institutional accreditors. CAEMHSE for us helped reinforce the importance of integration because it has more of an interdisciplinary spin than a lot of accreditors. And then this centralization that we've undertaken is really geared to reduce burnout, higher process for faculty and staff, which again, we're quickly working our way ultimately into. So I know I'm at right at 9:45, Alexander, and I saw that we had two chat comments. Oh, good, and it's from Michael talking about that. And Jay, I will definitely make sure the slides are available. I'll send those over to Daisy and Megan. But I'm happy to take a question or two. But otherwise, I want to make sure I keep you guys on schedule and pace.
Wonderful, Will. So any quick questions for Will? Oh, very good, Jay. So great. Yeah, moving CAEMHSE forward. This is fantastic. Wonderful. So with that, well, thank you so much for the pitch for CAEMHSE, but then also for the overview. And I think this is an interesting practice that we have at Embry-Riddle that is also of relevance to others. And also, obviously, not only I think Will's approach not only applies to academic accreditation, but also professional and mission-based programs accreditation as well, because it's an overarching framework. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I hope I'll see you in the next session. And thanks, Will.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.